All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to our live video here on the Birkie Biner Facebook page. My name is Blair. I work with the Birkie team, and I'm really happy to be joined tonight by some of our partners. We've got Fluid Health and Fitness down here in this corner. They're joining in from their base in Stillwater, Minnesota, I believe. We have Ryan Maxwell. He's the founder of Fluid Health and Fitness, and Margie Nelson, one of the physical therapists on staff there. And just above me here, we've got some members of Team Birkie, and they're coming to us all the way from Sun Valley, Idaho. They can fill us in a little bit about what they've got going on out there, but we have Gus Schatzline and Tony Matthey. So welcome, everyone. Really excited to have these folks in the room, the virtual room with us tonight to talk a little bit about that link between nutrition and training, and really how those two, when married properly, can help give you that edge, whether you're training for the Birkie, maybe it's your first race and you just don't really know how to approach nutrition and training. We'll have a little something for everyone tonight. Before we jump into the deep stuff, I'm going to let's start out with Fluid Health and Fitness. You guys can just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background and how the health and nutrition came into your world.
I guess I could start. My name is Ryan Maxwell, again, founder of Fluid Health and Fitness. Background is in athletic training and nutrition management. I was a metabolic coach for a number of years. Spent time, I got my background certification with Precision Nutrition, a great institution, by the way, for those who are looking for more information on nutrition management. And so we do metabolic coaching with RQ values and learning how to use nutrition to optimize performance. So we do that in-house in our clinic here too, so people can come in and get their caloric expenditure measured, and then also figure out what the caloric needs are during exercise at different intensities. So anyone out there who's interested in that, feel free to come in and check out that process. But ultimately, yeah, we specialize in functional integrated training, or it's called fundamental kinesiology. So we're teaching people how to move. Our background is in corrective exercise. We're a continuing education provider for National Academy of Sports Medicine. We're on the advisory board for St. Paul College, and also a part of the biomechanics lab at the Northwestern Health Sciences campus and their Sweary Pain Management Center. So we're helping people how to learn how to move better so that they can continue to do the things that they love. And we're real excited to work with everybody with the Birkie group. So yeah, that's me.
Well, I'm Margie Nelson. I'm a physical therapist here at Fluid, and I'm also an avid Nordic skier. So I've done a bunch of Birkies and all the other local races, as well as coach with Endurance United, and I've been with other various groups, kids to adults, but mainly adults now. So I help people get ready for the Birkie and all the other races around town. So I like helping keep people active and moving.
That's awesome. And just to toot Margie's horn a little bit, she said she's done a lot of Birkies. She's done 15 Birkies and 4 Cordies. So she's really close to that Birchlegger status at 20 years. So keep going. I know you got it in you. All right, Team Birkie, tell us a little about yourselves.
Sure. I can go first. My name's Gus Schatzline. I grew up just south of the cities in Savage, Minnesota. And I went to school up at the College of St. Scholastica, where I got a degree in biology and skied on the ski team there. And it's my first year on Team Birkie, and I'm just really excited to really tour like the U.S. and race professionally.
My name's Tony Matthey. I grew up in Edinburgh, Pennsylvania, and then I came to the Midwest when I went to the University of Minnesota. I skied on the ski club there and majored in environmental engineering. And then I graduated last spring and joined Team Birkie last year for the first year of Team Birkie. So this is my second year on the team. Yeah, just really excited to, train and race hard. Looks like it's going to be a really awesome season this year.
Yeah. And you guys are out right now. Are you training or are you racing in Sun Valley?
So we are racing out here. Okay. We started our season, what would it be, 3 weeks ago. We traveled to Silver Star up in Canada. And we had 4 races up there. That was the kickoff to the Super Tour. And then yesterday, or was it 2 days ago, we flew down here to Sun Valley, and then we'll have 3 races this weekend.
Awesome. Well, good luck to you guys. And I know there is a tie-in between Team Birkie and Fluid Health and Fitness. Y'all are not strangers. Do you want to share with our viewers the tie between your organizations?
Yeah, I can speak on that. So Fluid signed on as a sponsor of Team Birkie this past year, and what that includes is, at least for us, is we've been going in to Fluid. We got initial assessments where the way that they do things there is a little bit different than typical PT places. Ryan measured all of our strengths in all of these different positions and muscle groups, and then mapped out a whole list of imbalances and then ways that we can work on that. And really working at things from a basic level first, where, you know, we're working on pretty fundamental stuff that translates into, you know, performing better skiing and being more resistant to injury. And we all have seen a really big benefit from that, only from a couple months of help.
Yeah, he nailed it. So it's been so we look at deficits in strength and mobility and neuromuscular control. So a lot of times people, they think there's a difference between technique and the fundamentals when it's really one and the same. But the foundation is always about intrinsic stabilization and then moving with pattern or controlled pattern. So what we teach people is how to develop these fundamental patterns of movement through their body, through chains of muscle that help to stabilize and position and create force through the body. And sometimes there's little deficits in those segments that we may not be aware of or we may not feel. So when we go through and we really kind of with a fine comb test all the strength relationships and mobility and control relationships, we're able to tease out those imbalances. And then that gives us some direction, some specificity about how we want to approach some supplemental exercise or strength exercises that people can do to help them stay more active and, again, like you said, avoid injury and stay in the game.
Yeah. So it's a little different than, I'm thinking back to my high school and college days where everybody walked into the gym and had the same plan, did the same exercises on, you know, every part of their body was exactly the same. You guys are really honing in and getting specific with which muscle groups need to be strengthened and which are maybe stronger than they need to be. And I'm oversimplifying to a large degree. So, but great. Well, do you guys, Ryan, do you want to kick things off? I know you had some nutrition topics that you thought were pretty specific to, you know, kind of more endurance, athletics. I'll let you roll with that.
I think the main thing is to have, again, baselines. One thing that people go into this, again, like you were saying, some generic things. They come in with preconceived notion. Sometimes we have some programs that we did when we were younger and we just kind of run with it forever, right? And things don't really change. You know, science evolves, knowledge evolves, and ultimately what we want to know first off is, are we maintaining our nutrition by getting enough of the substrate or the nutrients that our body needs? I think a lot of times people sometimes skip past the fundamentals, which is, are we getting enough to support our basic energy requirements? So first off, we want to know, do you have enough energy to support your basal metabolic need or your daily caloric intake? So the first thing that we would do is have you come in and would do a VO2 test where we would figure out your baselines. Sometimes people don't have access to those resources. So there are estimates out there that you can get, and they're pretty accurate. But once you get those baselines, it basically says how much do you need to support your non-cognitive homeostatic control mechanisms, or the things that your body needs to keep you alive without you thinking about it. And if we're not getting that base need in first, and then we start working on some of these nuanced things like, you know, energy in during a race or before or after, I think we're kind of missing the big picture. So it's first figuring out what are your needs to support your body's composition. So your body is, you know, a machine, and it has different energy needs based on your composition. So you have lean tissue and fat tissue, and there is an energy requirement that's necessary to support those tissues. And it's good to know what that is as a baseline to start. And then from there, we can start looking at other activity factors that express themselves on your thermogenesis or your breakdown of energy, like exercise-induced thermogenesis or daily activity movement that's not necessarily classified as exercise. But once you have those buckets known or at least classified to some degree, you can figure out what your body's needs are. And normally it breaks down into two substrates, which are sugars or fats. And we know that as we increase our efficiency in the use of fatty acids for energy, there's less stress on the body, and we're able to do more work. And that goes for just daily living or for exercise in general. So I think that's really kind of important to know in the beginning and understand what your diet is when you're consuming foods chronically throughout the day. And are you getting a good combination of fatty acids and carbohydrates in your diet? And are they supporting your energy demands depending on the activity factors that you're expressing?
So it sounds like this is something that's obviously going to be very unique, person to person, not a one size fits all approach. I know that, for our viewers, we already have a few questions coming in that I might just throw out so we don't get bogged down. It's going to be probably really hard to answer some of these because it's going to be so dependent on each individual's body makeup and what they're eating and what they're burning and just how their body uses energy. But one of our first questions that came in from David says, regarding training and nutrition, what is especially recommended for those of us who are trying to keep going, whether very veteran skiers or not, at advanced ages? So it will be 73 for him at this year's Birkie with just 6 Birkies under his belt. So maybe as an aging athlete, what are the different requirements people might be, needing to pay more attention to?
You want to target that one?
Well, I can give it a shot anyway. So I think the biggest thing for like a long race, a Birkie race, would be to practice your fuel intake during your long skis and your other workouts. Get a handle of like how to take the energy, how much you need, how your body responds to it, and then create a really nice plan so that you don't crash. Like take that gel, like map out a plan. Every aid station, I'm gonna take some energy and pick which energy you're gonna do it and do it. Don't say like, I'm trying to keep up with Ryan. I can't take my energy gel. I'm gonna lose him on the trail. It's probably more important to keep on top of that so that you don't bonk at some point during the race. And then if you have it all on you, you can just keep it going so you don't fall, victim to a bonk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, Gus or Tony, when you guys are training and now you're getting into racing season, how does that look for you guys when you are training? And how are you making those adjustments, after a race? I would imagine each one looks a little different.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the race for sure. We haven't had too many long races yet where we need to take in any energy during the race yet, but definitely during training, all summer we're intaking energy in the form of liquid drink mix. We have that, and pretty much all of our training sessions will have liquid drink mix with some sort of carbohydrate in it. And some sodium to keep when we're sweating a lot. And then we'll also eat bars. Usually we stop almost every hour when we're training to eat something and to make sure that, we're keeping up with the energy that we burn. And a lot like Ryan talked about, it's really important to make sure you're intaking as much as you're burning and getting rid of.
Yeah, and to just add on to that, one thing that our coach, Caitlin Gregg, always hammers into our head before the long races, at the end of the year, like the Birkie, is to fuel early and often. So going in with a plan on when you're going to take feeds and actually sticking to that, because it's pretty easy early in the race to get caught up in the hectic nature of a big race like the Birkie and, forget to take your feed until you're 15K into the race. And by that point, you're already kind of in a deficit. So kind of making a plan, like Margie said, and just being on top of that early.
Yeah, I think something to keep in mind too is how long it takes for replenishment or glucose repletion. A lot of times people think they can just gorge on carb, right before and restore the glycogen in their muscles. And that's, unfortunately, our body's not that efficient. So it's recognizing that it takes some time. And if we're in an anaerobic energy system where you're like doing hills or up in that zone 3 area, your body's ripping through a lot of glucose in your muscle, and that takes time to replenish. So if you're doing a lot of training up to an event and you've depleted those glycogen storages, having a plan in mind of what you need to consume through the duration of a week or even a couple weeks in advance to really kind of top off the tank by the time you go into an event, so that you have full storages of energy in the muscles when you're ready to get into that event. And some estimates I read were you're looking at like 20 grams of carbohydrate per hour for every waking hour for 7 days to really get back to a glucose replenishment. So if that kind of puts things in perspective, right, it does take some time. So it's like a small apple every hour for every waking hour for about a week. So if you think you're going to get it from one big meal of pasta, it's
a Friday night pasta feed at St. John's isn't going to get you ready for the birthday. Come on.
You'll sleep well, but yeah.
So you said, just give us that number again in case folks missed it and want to jot it down. We'll throw it in the comments as well. But 20 grams.
Basically waking every waking hour for 7 days to get a replenishment. If you've depleted all the glucose out of your muscle from like an anaerobic system. So if you put your body under time under tension where you've depleted your primary energy system is glucose or glycolytic, you don't need much. 12 minutes at like an intensity range of 70% of your 1 rep max will rip out all the glucose out of a big muscle. And then it takes some time to replenish that. So if you're doing hill repeaters and you've done 12 of them, there's a good chance that the big muscle groups have lost their energy reserves and it's going to take some time to refuel. So being aware of that when you go into an event, I think is going to be key for the longevity, right? The stamina, the endurance of it.
And can you guys share, whether, our Fluid folks or Team Birkie, what are some of kind of your go-to foods that you use for that refueling process leading up to a race and as you're getting closer to an event?
I think Tony has some good expertise here. He's gluten-free actually, so this is important, I think, for people that might not be able to get like gluten items. What do you?
Yeah, so I started eating gluten-free last year because it was kind of giving me problems in training, especially. So the biggest things are in the days leading up to a race, making sure you're having good energy intake. So for me, that looks like a lot of maybe rice or quinoa or potatoes or something with a lot of carbs, and also keeping the protein intake high enough. But then within races, like long races or training sessions, Team Birkie just got a sponsorship from Untapped Maple, and we've been using their products in our training sessions. And those are just maple syrup gels. So it's a pretty simple energy system where you're just eating maple syrup, but it's just sugar, and that's really all you need when you're taking a gel. And then some solid foods. They have these waffles that are really tasty. I think the most important thing in your training sessions and in your racing is if it tastes good, you're more likely to eat it. So even if it's not optimal, if it tastes good to you, then you're going to eat it more, and then you'll get more help from that.
I think speaking to that too is the understanding that if you're low on glucose, your body's going to go into gluconeogenesis, and that basically means new sugar creation. And that means it's going to start taking reserves from your lean tissue potentially, because you're going to use amino acids to create a new glucose indigenously rather than an exogenous form from like a food source. So if your deficits are heavy in sugar or carbohydrate or muscle glycogen because you've depleted it, your body's going to go after amino acids, and unfortunately that means your muscle mass. So being aware of what you're consuming and how much you really need for that replenishment. And if like Tony was saying, if we don't, what's going to happen is you could very well lose mass that you don't want to lose, right? So being on top of that and again, knowing the protein requirements to support your lean tissue, I think is really important.
Yeah, and just hearing some of what you're saying, Ryan, there was a question that kind of stuck in my mind coming into this conversation. There's a lot of information out there for people. You can find a diet to fit your personal preferences every direction you look. But whether it's keto, carb cycling, intermittent fasting, there's so many different things. When you're looking at it from a training and an endurance perspective, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm hearing you wrong, if you're going that lower carbohydrate rate, you really run the risk of losing muscle mass, or not even just mass, but just muscle tissue that could have a negative effect on your endurance. Is that?
Well, there's a couple factors that people need to think through is absorption, their absorption rate, what your depletion is. So what did you burn off, right? What are you breaking down? What you break down, you have to restore. And then if you want to grow, you have to be at a surplus. And then you have to think about what the absorption rate is for each one of these macronutrients. And again, macros are fats, carbs, and proteins. So you may want to consume something in a balance of food, and you have these different bouts of time called postprandial and post-absorptive. And so it's stages of where your body is taking in energy from an exogenous form. And so you're actually taking in energy through your stomach and the small and large intestine. And then there's times where you don't get the energy from that external form and you're actually making it internally. And they're always kind of in flux. And so when you've gone through higher levels of exertion, your body's going to need more energy at that point in time. So trying to partner the glycemic loading of certain foods with those energy expressions are important. So timing or chronicity of the refeeds are going to impact the kind of or quality of that carbohydrate that you're going to take in. So again, like those more simple carbohydrates, like the waffles, those kind of things, where you're ripping through it and you need to get it in so that the cells are actually being replenished. So your body's not saying, well, let's start breaking down amino acids for energy. And there's a narrower window after a workout. But then as it extends, looking at what your body's recovery needs are too. And how much does it take to digest or ingest, and how much are you actually absorbing in those postprandial, stages of food intake. So recognizing baselines typically are around, okay, what do you need chronically? And so someone may have a resting metabolism where they're more oxidative, which means they're going to use more fatty acids over sugars. So they may be more efficient at being able to take in fats and proteins and not use the sugars. So they don't need to take in as much in carbohydrate. And there's a lot of training protocols out there that advocate for conditioning those energy systems to be more aerobic in nature so that they don't have to be in a glycolytic energy expression during their workouts or when they're active. And that way you don't get the byproduct of that glucose metabolism, which makes you less efficient. So you're able to sustain longer, extensive endurance without bonking. So there's different ways to look at it. But again, I think it goes back to understanding what your base needs are, what your respiratory baseline is, what your efficiency is. Do you have a genetic predisposition towards use of sugar or fats over the other? And there are tests and assessments that you can have or you can take to get a more accurate reflection of what your needs are. So instead of just winging it, you can drill it down and kind of get a better baseline. So I think it's a depends thing. Yeah.
No, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions in here. So Ryan, do you recommend any feeds or foods that when consumed specifically will increase oxygen levels in the blood?
So thought process is, there's all sorts of things that help or promote like nitric oxide and essentially oxygen delivery. Whole foods are always going to be your go-to. And basically, if your body is dependent on glucose, you're going to prefer glucose for energy. So getting your body to switch over to use of fatty acids through the macronutrient baselines are going to really help you with oxygen delivery. So again, if you have to use oxygen more efficiently to process that energy system, which is again like hemoglobin and red blood cells, conditioning those systems to be more responsive to that energy system is going to help with oxygen saturation levels and oxygen diffusion. So it's again more about not just finding a food that's like the magic food, but really conditioning the energy system to be more efficient.
And kind of a follow-up to that from Carl. From both perspectives, can you guys talk about the use of caffeine during training and or racing? How do you use it? Is it an effective tool? Should people be looking into that? A lot of these gels and different things come in the super caffeinated versions, or like the maple syrup, no caffeine. So where do you guys land on that topic?
Yeah, we can start
Yeah,
at least. I think before most races, try to get in some sort of caffeine. My go-to is usually coffee. And it kind of depends on how I'm feeling, but anywhere from 1 to maybe even 3 cups of coffee in the morning, especially because coffee, depending on the coffee, has varying levels of caffeine. But yeah, I think caffeine is really important for races to get the most out of yourself. It helps not only to wake you up, like having coffee in the morning, but also it does have some performance benefits in the fact that it sort of makes you feel not as tired and more resistant to fatigue, I think. And it's definitely a staple, I think, in the whole professional racing scene. I think most athletes would probably say that they use caffeine in some form or another.
Yeah, one addition that I'll add on to that, I'll say I use caffeine all the time too. Every race, pretty much everybody at the pro level does. But that's also because a lot of our racers are shorter than a marathon might be. Caffeine is also a diuretic, so it'll pretty much dehydrate you, which is not performance enhancing when you're doing a marathon. So a lot of times when you're designing a feed plan for a long race like the Birkie, you'll ingest caffeine in the later stages of the race. Really about up to an hour for me is as long as it can be helpful before it starts hurting. I've taken caffeine before really long races, and it's definitely hurt me. But I think if timed appropriately, it's definitely a performance enhancer.
Margie, yeah. I'd be curious to hear, with your years of Birkie skied, is caffeine something that you've used as a tool on the trail or before the race?
Yeah, probably more recently. I definitely make sure I have a couple gels with caffeine for later in the race, like Tony said. I do think it's protective against getting super tired. Like, it just wakes you up a little bit, gives you energy. I drink coffee in the morning, not for benefit of performance, though.
Yeah. To speak to Tony's point about the diuretic, for every ounce of caffeine you take in, you probably want to consume another ounce of water or something else that's going to help to hydrate you. So it's a pretty potent diuretic. So just making sure that a lot of times people who consume it and are like, well, I get my hydration through coffee and teas and things like that, or like sugary beverages. Those are considered diuretics. So you want to go and make sure that you're consuming an ounce on top of it for every ounce that you're taking in. And that should help with maintaining your water levels. And again, it's good to check. So if you're tracking water loss for the workout, you can kind of look at before and after with a caffeine supplement and see how much more you've expended and get a baseline. So look at what your normal would be without the caffeine, and then what it would be with the caffeine, and then look at the deficit and see what you would need to consume. And just recognize that the stomach can only absorb about 4 ounces every 10 minutes. And if you're guzzling it down, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get into the bloodstream. So just making sure that you're consuming it consistently, and you're kind of like a sponge. So you want to make sure you're drinking water beforehand, up to get it into the body before the event. Make sure you know what your water loss is during the event, and then how much you've lost. You want to make sure that you're consuming extras afterwards to get your body to replenish. So there's ways to look at that.
Yeah. And to measure that water loss, are you purely going by your weight, weighing yourself before and after? Are there more specific ways that people can be, if they want to try to track that at home during training?
Weight is the typical go-to. So you measure yourself before, do the event, and then afterwards. And it's a lot more than you think. So the first time you do it, you're like, I'm not going to lose all that much. And then you're like, whoa, 2 pounds. How did I lose 2 pounds in a work? Yeah, but it is, you will lose a lot of water. So just recognizing that, again, the universal conduit is water, and it helps to again, keep our blood circulating through our body, and you need it in order to have efficiency with your aerobic energy system. So make sure if you are going to take a diuretic like caffeine, that you're aware of the consequences with the water loss.
And I'm going to backtrack just a little bit, because in our previous question about kind of foods that can help, with oxygenation of the blood, and I know, Ryan, you kind of came to the conclusion that it depends. But if people are looking for whole foods to be consuming on during these longer events, I know personally the goos sometimes just give me such a gut rot. I can only do so much goo. What are some whole foods that you recommend that are good on the trail?
There's for intra event, there's a great supplement out there called Super Starch. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it's a slower absorbing carbohydrate source. It's like a starch. So the molecular weight is such that it doesn't absorb so quickly through the stomach lining. And so it has more of a neutral baseline glucose management effect. So when you're taking it in, it's not so potent, it's not so sugary, and it helps to basically actually increase your ability to use fats, because it allows you to maintain a neutral baseline for energy. So the product was designed for kids who are dealing with diabetes and they needed to maintain stable blood glucose during the evening. So that's a really great product. I know a lot of endurance athletes that advocate for that. As far as like chronic, you got to look at the glucose loading of the food. And that goes back to like tubers or rices or grains or cereals or pastas, right? Those are going to give you more sugar immediately in the bloodstream, as opposed to things that are bound more to like the fiber, which you're going to see more in the fruits and vegetables, where you're going to get less sugar absorbed. And then you get the nutrients and the fiber and the water that come with it. So it's really, I think, going back to timing and when your body needs the energy. So if you're just consuming it just to consume it, well, you can, total is more important than chronicity. So making sure you get it in, like you said, if you're not eating enough, there's dire consequences, right? But if you're looking at timing, it would be, okay, what did you burn and what does your body need? And then you would use your diet to satisfy that. So I love brown rice and like sweet potatoes. Again, they've got more of a slower absorbing glucose, and then you get the fiber from the brown rice and the nutrients from the brown rice. So these are all great tools people use. And then again, green leafies and all the like cruciferous vegetables that have the antioxidants to help with inflammation, right? So making sure that you're getting the polyphenols and the flavonoids and all the things that are going to help your body. And again, the main thing to think about before I go in to think about starch, I think about, am I getting the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that my body needs in order to support the cofactors for my metabolism? And so the normal rule of thumb is about 5 to 7 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, with like a 1-to-2 ratio of fruit to vegetable, making sure that you're getting your carbohydrate sources from those nutrient-dense foods, and then looking at the energy expression from the activity factors that would justify the addition of the starches. And that's when you would start to plan out your food sources around that. And again, these are suggestions. I got to qualify. I'm not a dietitian, but I work with a lot of dietitians, and these are the things that they normally make the recommendations for sports performance or sports performance nutrition plan.
Nice. So I'm just going to ask on that note. So thinking, I feel like that's, kind of big picture, day to day throughout your training, race days here. I was reading, so I did a trail half in the spring, and I was reading about using mashed potatoes. So I took 2 Ziploc baggies of mashed potatoes with me and ate them on the trail. It was delicious. But whether it helped or not, I'm not really sure. But whole foods, I know, like during the Birkie, we do bananas at our feed stations and oranges, just to give people some food options. Sometimes, during the Birkie trail run in the past, we've had spots where people could stop and make a PB&J if they were doing the marathon or the ultra, or just some, different options, oatmeal, things like that. Tony and Gus, is there anything for like those distance races that you guys turn to outside of kind of the gels and the bars that are more whole food based, or do you tend to stick more with kind of the specific products?
Do you have much experience?
Yeah.
I actually don't have a lot of experience racing super long races.
Yeah, I've done 5 Birkies now and a couple Vassas in the City of Lakes. So I've done a couple marathons, and really, like the gut rot of the super sweet stuff, I don't get that as much. Like I'll eat candy on long workouts sometimes. So the gels don't really bother my stomach until it's a lot of hours into a workout. So usually I can fend those symptoms off until after being done with a long race like that. So yeah, I've only ever stuck with gels, really. Gels and sports drink. And then, you know, at the finish line, maybe my stomach might be a little upset, but usually gels can hold me off until the finish line.
And keeping in mind, these guys skiing a marathon are probably hours less on the trail than most of us average, even above average skiers. So I'm just putting that out there for our viewers. Take some of their advice with a grain of salt, because these guys are professionals.
If we're doing a really long training session in the summer, we'll do training sessions that are 3 or 4 hours. And on those, we'll always have some more real foods.
Okay.
So yeah, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is a really good one that Blair had mentioned. But something real and easy to eat on those longer sessions, those will be a lot better than the super sugary like workout foods.
Thank you for sharing that. And another one for you, Gus and Tony. Wondering, you know, more on the training side of things. Do you guys use oximeters when you're training out on the trail?
We do not, as far as I know, Tony doesn't either.
I've never.
We are pretty diligent. We use heart rate monitors in almost all of our training sessions, barring maybe strength training, but we're pretty diligent about having our heart rate metrics. And I mean, not all of us, but most of us, I mean, look at that data every day. So.
Do you guys, Margie or Ryan, have anything to add? You know, are there benefits to using that as a citizen trainer, as a tool, or would you lean more towards the heart rate monitors? What is a recommendation for our viewers?
I mean, I do mainly heart rate based training as well. So I haven't used the oximeter as a training tool. No.
I use heart rate variability. So it's a measure of the vagal tone, which then represents the autonomic nervous system activity. So you can see how your body's central nervous system responds to stress, both chronically and acutely. So it's not diagnostic in that it tells you, hey, you're going to have a heart attack, but what it will say is how your body responds to stress, and have you overloaded your system? So if you go into a high vagal tone, or a low vagal tone, I should say, which means your vagal nerve, which controls your organs and basically your central nervous system. If it's going low, it means your body's fatigued. So that gives you some information about how you might need to recover both acutely and chronically. So in session, you take a hill and you're crushing it. Well, you're going to see a really big spike in heart rate, but you're going to see a low vagal tone. And so if you can't recover from that bout of exercise, as you go back into more of an aerobic system, you'll see that the vagal tone stays low and it doesn't go back up. So it tells you how much stress is on your body. And that's a great tool, because then you can start to look at how your body responds to stress incrementally, both for duration in the session, but also how quickly it takes you to recover from it after the effect. So I really advocate for variability because it gives you a lot of information you can use to guide your training sessions.
Yeah, it sounds like I'm just trying to sync this up for people out there who are training for the Birkie, Cordy, Prince Hoken. how hard do I want to hit this hill based on, how my body responded in training, or, beginning of the race, end of the race, what I can expect from my body at that time to really kind of fine tune your approach and how you're looking at your race.
Yeah, you can definitely model the intensity factors that would express themselves on the person, and then look at how your body responds to it over multiple circuits. So when you're training, you compare those circuit intensities against what would be the activity expression during that event, and then see how your body responds to it, and see if you have the stamina to support the duration of the activity. So that way you don't go all out. And always remember that the activity factors during an event are going to be a bit more heightened because of the stress associated with the activity.
Mm-hmm. And some of that stress being healthy stress, right? Like that good adrenaline, a bit of adrenaline.
Not distress, eustress. Yeah. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
I'm just peeking at my calendar here. Back here, so on January 21st, we have the Birkie Tour. So for folks who are watching, if you want to come out and see, and track some of these things, try out, these different feed options. We'll have, the Birkie Tour set up where you can do a variety of distances on the Birkie Trail and really try to fine tune that. Just one opportunity. We've got lots of events happening this winter, but if you're looking for, a day or a time to kind of get that maybe adrenaline pumping a little bit between Sealy Hills Classic. We're doing actually a night race during the Birkie Tour, which will be super fun. A lot of opportunities if you want to come train on the Birkie Trail this winter, just recreationally as well. So come hang with us up here in Birkie land. We got a little fresh snow today, so it's looking beautiful out there. One question we got, kind of a statement / question, but I think there's a question in there. So finding it hard to eat when it's really cold out, which, sometimes it is during cross-country ski season. Gels can get hard. They can, the waffles, I've made that mistake one year in the Birkie and they were hard as a rock. I couldn't eat them. Any suggestions from you guys at Team Birkie when it's really cold out? What are some good ways to keep your food edible, I guess, or your energy?
Yeah, some products, just by the way that they are way harder to eat when it's cold out. Like the Goo branded gels are super hard to eat, like almost impossible when it's really cold. I think the maple syrups from Untapped are pretty good in the cold. The waffles can get kind of hard to eat. So when it gets really cold like that, the biggest thing is keeping things warm. One thing I'll always do with the drinks that I'm bringing is make sure that they're warm when you put them in. And then there are also a couple creative solutions with hand warmers or toe warmers to try to keep some heat in there during the event. But yeah, as it gets colder, it's just kind of tough, honestly. You might end up having to switch to most of your calories coming from liquids and sports drinks, and just making sure that those stay warm enough to drink.
Well, and I can speak to that a little bit too, because I do agree that the maple syrup is much runnier, which I found to be nice because the thick gels are not great. But if you pin your gel to your waist of your pants or your ski suit and then you tuck it in, it usually keeps it warm. So you can your gel shouldn't be frozen. I'm not sure about a waffle, but if you could sew in a little pocket, it might work. But you can, that's a great, I mean, if you can get it close to your body, then usually you don't have the frozen gel. And like I said, the maple syrup, I did use that this last year at the Birkie, and I thought it was great.
Nice. And, hopefully a lot of this is great for training. Hopefully when you're going out to these supported races, you're going to have, great aid stations where they're keeping things at least somewhat temperature controlled if they can, but it gets cold for you, it's cold for the aid station too. So it goes both ways. But all right, so we've been going here for about 45 minutes, guys. I don't see any other specific questions that have come in yet, but for anybody watching or rewatching this later tonight or in the next few days, feel free to add any questions that come to mind in the comments. We'll see if we can get someone from this group to respond, and we'll do our best to do that. But do you guys have anything imparting just to encourage, or any maybe final tips and tricks when it comes to nutrition and your training regimen as you're leading into this winter ski season and kind of looking towards that kind of A race, that #1 race that you're training for? Any parting thoughts?
I think one thing that I would add or reiterate maybe is that eating often is really important, and making sure you're eating enough. That sometimes it's easy to think that you're eating enough, and then find out, after a race or some hard intensity, that you're feeling really tired and you don't necessarily know why, and often it's because you haven't been eating enough. And so I think that's important to reiterate.
Tony,
Yeah, start practicing your fueling now. So grab your gels, go out, try it out when you're doing loops at your local place or on the Birkie Trail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awareness and preparation, I think those are big words. Knowing what you need, having a baseline. Again, baselines are key. And that way you're not consuming too little or too much. You can figure out what you need. And preparation is key. So some of the things you can throw a stone and hit a carbohydrate. So those are easy to come by. But it's the proteins and the healthy fats that are typically the struggle. So doing a little preparation and planning for those proteins, I think, is key. And typically those are the ones that are going to be the struggle to consume. I don't think, from what I see from our population, it's hard to get enough in. And so just being more diligent about the amino acid intake that you're taking in, because every cell in your body is made of amino acids. If you're doing work like that on your body, you're going to definitely need those proteins. So making sure to plan for that.
Yeah, I would say the biggest, most helpful thing that I would say is just like go out and try different stuff. Go out and ski, and training doesn't hurt. So go out and ski as much as you can and have fun and try a couple different things out and see what works best for you.
Absolutely. And Ryan and Margie, before we go, if folks are interested in connecting with you, obviously you guys have a really amazing team, a lot of people and a lot of knowledge on staff. If someone kind of wants to take the deep dive into this, or kind of those functional movement assessments, how do they find you? How do they get connected?
Well, anything nutrition based, we have dietitians on staff that can work with. Everyone who comes in, they normally do a health history questionnaire, and that then gives us a better understanding of what their needs are, background. So if they reach out, they can go to fluidhealthandfitness.com, and then if you click right on there, it'll say, schedule an appointment. We do virtuals for those of you who can't make it to the 2 locations. So there's always the ability to do that. Otherwise, we've got great resources on our website for basic questions on nutrition and on functional movement, on movement systems,